Hey friends, it's Mike. So I picked up this Hondo II from Sam Ash. I got a very, very good price on it. And some of you may know from watching my other videos that I really enjoy collecting vintage guitars, especially the made in Japan stuff from the 70s and the 80s. And Hondo made some very good guitars, especially when they came out with the Hondo II line. Before that, they were a little sketchy, but the quality picked up significantly when they came out with Hondo II. So this one caught my eye because it's in great shape. You could see the tiger stripe in the headstock. I'll show you the back of the neck where it's more pronounced. It looks great. But it is, it's old and it's got some wear and tear on it. Not too bad. Mostly the gold plating has disappeared from all of the hardware, so you can see that on the tailpiece and the bridge and the pickups. This is all supposed to be gold, and we're missing the tip here on the selector switch, but that's no big deal. There was a pick guard on it, and you can see here it is, the screw here, and this hole here is from the screw that goes through the pick guard that fastens to the bracket, and evidently it was pushed into the body, so I'll fix that too. I will be putting a new pick guard on it. The pick guard, most likely back in its day, was a tortoise because it would match the truss rod cover. So I have a tortoise Les Paul pick guard on order, a good one, 3-ply, and we'll get that back on the guitar. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, of course, clean her up. I'll do some fret dressing, clean up the frets and the fretboard. I'm going to keep the tuners. The tuners work very, very well. So I'm not going to swap them out, even though some of the gold plating is worn. That's okay. It is an old guitar. But I will be replacing the pickups. Pickups are going to have some really nice Wilkinsons in them, and they're gold. I'm going to replace the pickup rings as well. They look like they're white, but they're really not. They're cream, and they have faded over time. I believe this guitar to be the late 70s to the very, very early 1980s. So let's call it almost 40 years old. So the pickup rings themselves have faded. So we'll put some new cream pickup rings on. Wilkinson pickups, some real nice ones. I'll show you them when I get to that part of the video. Also have a new bridge. You can see here this has got the retaining wire. I hate the retaining wires. It's not even installed properly. It kind of slipped out back behind. You see that behind the screws. So a new bridge is going to go on. It is a 12-inch radius fretboard, so that's great. And they also have a new tailpiece. And we'll put some new knobs on too, unless I can clean these up to the point where they're acceptable. It's hard to see here, but they are kind of scratched up. Okay, so oh yeah, let me show you the back of the guitar. Let me show you the neck. This is really what caught my eye. Take a look at the tiger stripe. Isn't that great? It's really spectacular. I know the video is probably not doing it justice, but when you see it in person, it's really, really nice. Very interesting. You can see here the plate is actually in very nice shape. Some of the gold plating has disappeared on that, but it's in nice condition. You can see here it's kind of swooped, cut out. Right? This is nice here for when you play. It's got a little blemish here. We'll work on that a little bit of lacquer will help cover that up a little bit. And the plates look nice. One screw missing there, so I'll have to replace the screw. And there's one missing here, so I'll replace that as well. But other than that, for a 40-year-old guitar, this is in really nice shape. Very, very nice shape. And you can see it's 3-piece, right? 1, here's the line. 2, right? And you have another line here, 3. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to start work on it. So I'll start taking the strings off and pulling stuff out. And when I get to certain points in the restoration, I will stop and give you an update. All right, so stand by. Okay, so I wasn't sure if I was going to take the wiring out. I wanted to see if maybe if I spray it down with some deoxit and and say that we kept the original wiring, but after looking at it, there was too much oxidation The deoxit would have worked, but you know, I have some harnesses, Epiphone harnesses that are brand new, so I'm going to put them into the guitar, and we're going to put this into the trash. Okay, so these are the old pickups here. Let me pick them up for you, show you one of them. So they look like. Alright, you can see where the gold plating is still here, but not here. Alright, so everything's been pulled out of the guitar. This is the ground wire, so that stays. You can see that's clean, that's clean. And if I flip it over, this is what we've got. I'm going to have to pull these anchors out because over time what happened was when I was pulling the anchor posts out, turning them, they were very difficult to turn, so just a lot of corrosion over the last 40 years, so these are not going to be worth keeping. Sometimes what I'll do is, if they're in good shape on these old guitars, I will not replace them and I'll screw the new posts in and it works fine, but in this case I'm not going to do that, so these are going to have to come out. I'll have to check to see how the tailpiece posts, so that seemed to be okay. There wasn't a problem pulling that out, but the bridge, that was problematic on both sides. Okay, so let me start pulling these out and maybe getting the body cleaned up a little bit, and I'll be back. Okay, so trying to get the anchors out is proving to be a little more involved. So usually what I do is I'm able to drop a small screw head first into the hole, and you know, we'll use this as an example, and you know, the anchor is still there. And then I take the bolt and I start turning it, and because the screw is in the hole, it will lift this up automatically, right? So this I couldn't do it with because the threads were so rusted and decrepit that I really couldn't screw the posts down. So I had to go to plan B, which is to drill them out. So this one came out pretty quickly with the drill. So, you know, you put the big drill bit in there and you turn it very slowly, and what usually happens is it will start to turn the anchor itself, you know, back and forth, and then you're able to pull it out. This one, on the other hand, you can see, right, where we still have the anchor is still there. So now what I need to do is go to my my drill and take a bit that's just a little bit larger and keep doing it, a little larger, a little larger, a little larger, until the whole thing comes out. Now I did have one situation one time with a chipset that I was working on that I had to get it to the point where essentially the drill bit was the size of the anchor itself, and I was able to disintegrate it, if you will, and get it out that way. So this one here is, it's in there pretty good, so I don't know whether, you know, somebody poured glue in there or whatever, but when you do this, make sure you tape off a marker so that you don't go any deeper than when that tape begins, because if you do, you will go right through the guitar, and that's really going to suck. Okay, so be very careful if you do this method, but it does work, but you have to take your time, patience and time. Alright, so let me get this out and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. Alright, so this one's being extremely ornery and it's not budging, so this tape was what I used to mark the hole to begin with for the drill bit, see? You can see, get this into focus for you here, come on now. You can see I still have the rim of the post still there. So this might be another situation like I had with that chipset, where I'm going to have to actually get to the point where the drill bit is as wide as the hole itself to get this out of there, but I'll just take it step by step and see what we get. Alright, so I'll be back. Alrighty, so you can see here where the drill bit got to the point where it wore away the left-hand side of the anchor, and then what I'm left here is a little bit of the right, and you can see it's pulled away. So I have the tape here so that when I kind of moved it around with a little bit with the screwdriver to jar it loose, I didn't scratch the body. So now all we need to do is get some needle nose in there and pull this out. Doing this with one hand doing the camera, the other hand doing pulling here. There you go. That's it. Stubborn as all hell, but it's out. So now we'll put the new anchors in and we'll be ready to go. Okay, so that's it. That part of it's done. Every time you do this work, possibility of running into a challenge always exists. I'll come back after I have the new posts in and you can take a look. Thanks. All right, so you can see the new posts are in. Take a look there. Hopefully I can get this into focus. There we go. And there's the other one. Okay, and so the brand new bridge, it's going to go on. It does have the retaining wire like the old one, so that I wanted to keep this as close to the original as possible. So typically I don't like the retaining wires, but I'm going to do it with this guitar. And it is a good quality one. So I think I got this from Anthill Music. I'll put the link down below. And there you go. And I also cleaned her up. So you see that she shines up real well. I have a stain pen. I filled that in a little bit. It's going to be covered up by the pickup rings anyway, but did a little bit here. We're going to fix that hole. Pickguard's going to go on anyway, so it'll be covered up. But what you don't want to have happen is, as you're working on this and you're polishing, the rag to catch some of the parts that have chipped up, and then the chip becomes worse. So I'll take care of that now. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to the frets. Okay, so I'll be back. Okay, so I haven't gotten to the frets yet. That's next, but I did do the wiring. This is an Epiphone wiring harness. You can get them off of AliExpress. I think they're no more than 10 or 12 bucks, and they are real Epiphone parts. I'm going to put on a gold washer and gold nut, so you know, the hardware here matches the gold trim of the rest of the guitar. You can see that put some knobs on it. I had these in inventory. They look really nice. It's going to look very sharp. Guitar has been cleaned up. Let me just show you the pots. So this is the wiring harness that comes, and I marked B and N, bridge and neck, so I don't lose my orientation when I'm looking at the guitar. This is the ground wire. This will connect here. So when I'm ready to wire up the pickups and do the soldering, I'll connect that along with the pickups. This piece here connects to this piece here. This is the three-way switch. This is the coupler that brings all of the pots together, and that's it. 10 to 12 bucks on AliExpress. Like I said, real Epiphone parts. They're all marked Epiphone. No knockoffs. And I put these pre-wired harnesses in a number of guitars just to get the job done. I mean, you can sit there and solder if you want, but essentially at the end of the day, it's going to be this. So it's very cost effective. I'll be back in a bit. I don't know if I'm going to do the frets at this moment. Maybe I'll wait a few hours, maybe even a day or two. And we'll get that done, and we'll start putting the pickups in, and the guitar will really start to come along. Hey guys, it's Mike. I did a couple of things here, and let me show you where I'm at with the guitar. I plugged the holes where the holes were for the old pickup rings. And again, the way I do that is I put a little bit of Type-On in the hole. I get a nice, good quality, thick toothpick, and I force it into the hole. I'll even take some needle nose pliers and just squeeze it in, push it in, and then I clip it with some nippers. And then I let the glue cure. I usually give it about a day, and this now becomes like solid wood to drill into. The reason why you want to fill the holes is because if the ring on the pickup ring that you're putting in is off just slightly, what will happen is your screw is going to fish around, and sometimes it won't even fasten correctly. It'll be loose. So it's best to plug the holes. The other thing I had to do, if you remember the last segment, I had to use my drill and drill out the anchors that were here for the bridge. I had to do the same thing for the tailpiece. So what I did was I drilled this out, and I don't know if you could see that, the inside of the hole, there's no thread, and it looks like it was glued in. I don't know if you can see that. Let me see if I can get it in focus. Okay, so every once in a while you're going to run into this where the manufacturer will put some glue into the hole and then drop the anchor in, and then it's very difficult to get out. The only way I've actually, seen is proven is to drill it out. And of course, when you drill it out, you've got to be very, very careful. The other thing I did was to replace the old anchors with these anchors. And this is a much higher quality bridge. And these anchors for the posts, they're wider than the ones that were in there. So what I ended up doing was being very careful and using a larger drill bit. Remember, go incrementally, start small, then get larger and larger and larger until you get the proper fit. It should be a somewhat tight fit, don't make it loose. And I was able to do that, and that's how I got this tailpiece in. Okay, so this is a much better tailpiece. I'm not so hot on this bridge. I went back and took a look at my order on eBay. I think they sent me the wrong bridge. But for now, it's okay. I mean, it was 15 bucks, so I'll work with it. If I find I don't like it, I have some other bridges in inventory, or I'll just place an order for another one. No big deal. Now, you might be asking, what am I doing with the two strings on the guitar? What I'm doing is lining up the strings with the pickup poles, with the screws here. Now, a lot of times on these old vintage Japanese guitars, the spacing on the poles, they were a little off relative to the pole spacing on modern day humbuckers, okay? So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I get the strings as close to where they should be over these pole pieces. Many times you're not going to get it exact, and that's okay, because the magnetic field on a pickup, it doesn't just go straight up. It's out, so it's diagonal, it's up, it's this way. So you have a magnetic field right here. So as long as you're close, and this is very close, you're going to be fine. I see that question asked a lot. My strings don't line up exactly over my posts or my pole pieces on my pickup. Is that a problem? It's not a problem, again, because of the magnetic field. So what I'm doing is, since the pickup rings that were on the guitar, that's the other thing with these old vintage Japanese guitars, because they are very old. You're talking about 30, 40 years ago. The dimensions might be slightly off on the rings. I'm talking about the length of the rings and the depth of the rings. So, and it was the case with this one. The old rings were just a little bit wider. So now what I have to do is I have to be very careful that I'm able to fit the pickup ring on the guitar without showing any of this stuff, any of this mess here, right? Where the old ring pressed into the body or the finish of the guitar. So that's what I'm doing now. And when I do that, I also want to make sure, again, that the strings line up with the pole pieces on the pickups. You'll also notice that I went with black pickup rings. I was going to go with the cream, and I looked at it, and I didn't like it. I just didn't like the look. I think it looks classier with the black rings with the gold pickup, so that's what I'm going to go with. Also, I'm going to replace the hardware here, the washer and the nut, with a gold washer and a gold nut, which I have. So I'll do that, and that's the way it's supposed to look. Okay, so once I get this done, then, I know I keep saying this, I'm going to have to work on the fretboard and redress those frets. And you can even see down here, we have a little bit of playing indentation into the fretboard. This is from being played a lot, and the person that played this guitar, they did a lot of open chords like E, G, C, D, A, and so on. That's why you have this here. So I'm going to try to minimize that with some steel wool. I'm not going to get rid of it completely, but I'm not going to be too concerned about it because the guitar is 40 years old. And once I dress the frets and get some of those, you can see some of the notches, indentations in the frets from playing. So I'm going to file the frets down, recrown them basically, and then buff them up, and most of that will go away. I won't get all of it out on some of the frets, but that's okay. The guitar will still play well. The other alternative is to pull the frets and do an entire fret job, which I might do at some point, but right now it's not something I want to spend time doing. So, but I'll get it looking real good. I've done this before on other old guitars, and it came out fine. I'm also going to be putting a new bone nut on the guitar. This is the old nut. And we'll be all set. Okay? So when I'm done putting the pickups in, I will come back with the camera and show you what it looks like. Okay, so the pickups are in. And they're lined up nicely. So she's coming along. She's looking great. Alright, so I'm going to take a break. And maybe tomorrow or the next day I'll get hopping on the frets, get the fretboard all cleaned up and refreshed, and then she's going to look real good. Now I'm debating whether I go with the tortoise pickguard or I go with a black, like Gibson Custom, the 3-ply. I have to think about that, but she's coming out great. Okay, so I'll catch you guys. Have a great evening, and the next segment will be in a few days. Okay, so we're going to do the frets, and you can see where we have some indentation from the fingers being played over time on the fretboard, and here. So there was a lot of open chord playing, and you can see the little indentations, as I was mentioning in the previous segment, on the frets, and that's where the strings hit the top of the frets over time, and it just starts to wear the fret down. Now, I checked the frets, and you have that up until you get to around the 12th fret or so, and then you don't see that anymore. So whoever had the guitar used to play a lot between the 12th fret and the 1st fret, which tells me the person was most likely a rhythm guitar player and probably didn't play a whole lot of lead guitar. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to recrown the frets and see how close I can get to getting these little indentations out. And then I'll take some steel wool, very fine steel wool, 0000, that's the grade, and I will polish up the fretboard. I'm not going to be able to get all of this out, but it will smooth it out some. The only way to really get this out is two ways. One, you replace the fretboard, so I'm not going to do that. The second thing would be to remove all of the frets and then to use a radius board to sand it down a bit and to smooth it out that way. Now I've done that. I did that on the Electra. That's another guitar that I'm working on, and it had a very similar situation. And but the problem with that is you have to be careful. You can only sand lightly. If you sand too much of the rows of wood down, then what could possibly happen is the depth of the slot for the fret actually gets reduced, and when you go to put new frets in, you might have a problem getting the frets into the slot because the slot is not deep enough because you've sanded the top of the fretboard down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to plan A here first, which is re-crown the frets, smooth them out, and then use the steel wool to smooth out the fretboard. And let's see how that turns out. Okay, so I'll be back in a bit. Okay, so the first two frets are done, and you can see it looks much, much better. In fact, the first fret looks very good. Second fret, because of the nature of the second fret with E chords and the such, we have still some minor divots. You can see in the center and down toward where the high E string would be right here. But a lot better than it was. So at some point I will replace the frets on the guitar, but right now this will work and the guitar will play fine. Alright, so that's just a matter of doing some fret work. A great tool for this work is this tool. It is from Stu Mack, and the way it's designed, let's see if I can show you here, pyramid shaped at the top and the bottom. It's angled, and one side here has the file, and this is diamond, and on the reverse side the same thing. So what this allows you to do is to go along the frets like this, and because of the way it's cut at an angle, what it's actually doing, and you flip it around and you do the other way too, what it's actually doing is it's enabling you to recreate a crown on the fret, because it's filing the sides of the fret at an angle toward a tip, right? So you've got like this, kind of like this thing going here. So the sides get filed here, the sides get filed here, but they're being filed upward. And then you take a crowning tool and then round or crown the tops of the frets. It works great. There's other ways to do this. You could sand it and all that stuff, but I found that this tool here is excellent. Yeah, I think it's not cheap. I don't remember what it costs. Maybe it's 30 or 40 bucks for the file, but you're going to get a lot of use out of it because it is diamond. It's not metal on metal, so you've got the the diamond file. It's going to last a very, very long time. Just in case anybody was wondering how I was doing this, that's how I do it. And then I use micro mesh sticks. Some people might refer to them as like emery board sticks. There's different grades. You start with a more coarse grade to start polishing and helping to round the frets, and then you finish with a very fine stick, which allows you to polish it up to a gleam like this. All right, so that's what I'm doing, and I'm going to do this up through the 12th fret, and beyond the 12th fret I'm just going to polish them because there's really no wear and tear on those frets. Okay, so I'll be back. Okay, so I decided I was going to pull the frets. What was happening is, as I was making my way down the fretboard, there was some unevenness with some of the frets, which means I had to re-level them. And once I started to file the tops of them, what happened is that the fret had become so low relative to the fretboard that the crowning tool was not touching the top of the fret, so it wasn't rounding the fret. Okay, so, and to be honest with you, this is actually, even though it's more work, it's going to mean that the guitar is going to come out a lot better. So what I'm going to do now is get my radius block and put some 240 grit sandpaper on it and just lightly go over the fretboard and re-radius it and get rid of some of these flat spots here. Here, you see that here, here. This is from where, again, the fingers touch the fretboard, chord playing, and so on. So I'm going to do that now, and that's really going to freshen up the fretboard as well. It's going to look new because all of this, it looks old right now. It's because it is. It's 40 years old. So this whole top layer will be sanded off, and the rosewood will be refreshed. Okay, so when I'm done with that, I'll show you what that looks like. I'm going to remove the neck from the body, especially when you're using the radius block, because you don't want to slip. Because if you slip with the sandpaper, you're going to ruin the finish on your guitar and the body. Okay, so I'll be back after I sand. Okay, so I just lightly sanded the top of the fretboard. Here's the radius block right here. You can see how it's curved at the bottom. That's a 12-inch radius. And I just very lightly, in full strokes, from the nut all the way down to the end of the fretboard, just to refresh it a little bit. You can see here where it's still a little dark from the old finish, if you will, from being aged. And here you can see it's sanded. What that means is that the original radius on it was this dipped a little too low. That's what that means. And so it's going to look okay once I put the oil on the fretboard. It'll look fine. You won't see that. But the good news is that the fingering indentations in the fretboard pretty much came out. You can see still a little bit right here. The first fret, it all went away. Still have a little bit here. But like I said, you don't want to go so low with the sanding that you jeopardize the depth of the fret slots, because if you lower it too much, sand it too much, you run the risk that the frets, the tang of the fret, the fret slot will be too shallow and the fret will stick up, and that of course means a whole new fretboard. So be very careful when you do this. So all this stuff here, this is from the tangs. You won't see that when I'm done because the fret itself will cover that, and you're always going to have that. All right, so the good news is the 12-inch radius has been refreshed. I sanded it with, here's the steel wool, 0000, very fine for finishing. So the fretboard feels great. All right, so I'm going to start popping the frets in now, and I'll be back when I make some progress. Okay, so the frets are in. I used a combination of a fret hammer and also my fret press, which is over here lying on its side. So it came out very, very good. So now I'm going to clip the ends, and then I'm going to have to file the ends, dress them, put them at a slight angle, and then level the fretboard. So like I said, it's a lot of work, but when it's done, it's going to be worth it. And there's nothing like a brand new fret job on an old guitar. It makes it a new guitar. Okay, so I'll be back in a little bit. Okay, so I filed the edges. It's going to be hard to see, focus. And you can see they are slightly angled. See if I can get that to focus. Now, the reason why you don't want to go too much further is because you'll start eating into the binding. So what that means is the rest of the smoothing out and the dressing has to be done with a fret dress file, which I will do. But the initial angle is there, and it's looking, get that focus, it's looking pretty good. You can see here where you got a couple of spots where it catches a little bit, and that's because, especially on these old Japanese guitars, the binding was sort of rounded slightly at the top here. So when you put the fret in, what happens is the bottom of the fret right here, it's not always going to be flush against the binding because, again, the binding rounds, you know. So that's okay. Once I get the fret dressing file out, that'll all get fixed. And then I have to level all the frets. Whenever you put frets in, you have to level the fretboard. It's never going to come out level, I promise you. Okay, so she looks good though. You can see just a little bit of indentation here where the fretboard was worn from playing, but much, much better than how it was. Okay, so there you go. I'm going to take a little break now, and maybe in a few hours, maybe even tomorrow, I'll get back to dressing the frets and leveling them, and then oiling up the rosewood, and then she'll be ready to go. All right, you guys, have a great day. And I finally got back to taking care of this neck. So all of the new frets are on the guitar. I don't know if I covered that in the last segment. Sometimes I repeat myself. I apologize for that. It's because sometimes days or maybe even a week or 2 weeks can go by before I do the next recording segment. But I dressed all of the frets. The edges of the frets feel great. The fretboard really looks good. So I haven't put any oil on it yet. That's going to be next. And I'm going to put it back on the guitar now. Then I'll oil it. Well, actually, first I'll put the nut on, then I'll oil it. And we'll string her up, put the new pickguard on. And I do like the tortoise pickguard that came in. And she's going to be all done. And I think she's going to look spectacular. I really do. She's coming out great. All right, so I'll be back in a little bit after I reconnect the neck, and we'll take a look. Okay, so here she is. She's almost done. The only thing I need to do is to solder in the pickups. I haven't done that yet, so I have to flip her over. But you can see that she's looking great. That nut is a Graphtec new bone nut. It is self-lubricating, excellent nuts. The fretboard looks great. New frets. And the reason why there's two strings on there is because it's a bolt-on neck. So when I put the neck back on after having it off, I use the high E and the low E as guides to make sure that the strings are aligned properly over the holes of the pickups here and here, and also to make sure that I don't have the neck misaligned, and I don't, because this is 4/32 from the side of the low E to the side of the fretboard, and also the same thing here on the high E, 4/32 or 1/8 of an inch, and it's the same thing up here. So she's straight as an arrow, looking really good. All right, so let me hook up the pickups, get this mess cleaned up. It always looks like this when I work on these guitars, and then we'll do the final look of how this Hondo II came out. All right, be back. Okay, so the strings are on, and I just want to show you something here. We have the E, the A, the D, the G, and we got the B. Listen to this. Little sitar action going there, and the high E is fine. So when you get that kind of ring or buzz, it could be one of three things. One is the slot on the nut is not cut to the proper depth, so these slots do have to be cut deeper because the gap between the bottom of the B and the E and even the G and the top of the fret, there's too much gap, so I'll lower that. If that doesn't fix it, I have to do this anyway, you should properly slot the slots in the saddles. And I haven't done that yet. These are the slots that came already with this bridge on these saddles, and it's kind of one size fits all, so I'm going to take my slotting files and slot them properly. For the low E, which would be a bigger slot, obviously, because it's a bigger string, and so on, so I'll take care of that. If all that doesn't work, then might be a problem with this retaining wire, which are notorious for this type of buzz on the string. That's why I really don't like them. But let me do the slotting first and see if that takes care of it. And if it does not, then I gotta, goof around with this a little bit, see if I can get it to work properly. Other than that, she looks beautiful. Okay, so I'll be back after I figure out how to fix the buzz. Okay, well, she's all done, and she came out great. Now let's take a look. All cleaned up. I will have some before and after stills at the end of this video. I did fix the buzzing on the second string. Let's see here now. Sounds great. And the problem was two things, I believe. Well, for sure it was the slotting here at the nut, so it was way too high. So I deepened the slot there, and as I mentioned in the previous segment, I also took my slotting tools and I slotted or reslotted the saddles to the appropriate depth and size for the string that's going to be sitting on it. A lot of times what happens is when you buy these bridges, they come pre-slotted, but it's a one-size-fits-all slot like I mentioned previously, and to make it a better bridge, you really should slot it appropriately. So I have a set of Hosco fret files, and they're wonderful. And that's what I did, and once I did that, it had nothing to do with the retaining wire, thank God. All the buzzing went away. I did have to open up one of the machine heads in the back to put some WD-40. It was for the G string, to lube the mechanism, the gear inside, and that worked great. So I also sprayed a little WD-40 into the truss rod nut to make sure I loosened it a little bit before I started taking the Allen wrench to try to adjust it. When guitars are very old, you have to assume that that truss rod may not have been adjusted in a very, very long time, if ever. So a couple of squirts of WD-40, it ensured that when I did make the adjustment, because I did have to put a little bit of relief in the neck, it was too straight, it turned great and no problems. The relief set quickly and we're good to go. So if we take a look at the fretboard, you can see it's all oiled. I mentioned that, you know, this one area here where it was a little darker, and that's because in the olden days they would radius the fretboards by hand. So sometimes, you know, there's human involvement and it wasn't done like a machine would do it, but it looks very, very good. I do want to turn it around a little bit. I want to show you the tiger stripe because we're in a better light now. Take a look at that. That's my little sticker I put on the guitars that I work on. Yeah, take a look at that. Is that not awesome or what? It's beautiful. And the back of the guitar finished up looking great too. I replaced the screws. The old ones were rusted, set in, and all that stuff, so I just got rid of them. Okay, so that's it. So that completes the refurb and restoring of this Hondo II. Again, late 70s, early 80s is where I have it dated. If somebody knows better, please feel free to leave a comment in the comments section. It is hard to date these things because there are no serial numbers, and if there is a serial number, there's no database most of the time, so you have to do some research. I will put a link in the description box that will take you to a little history about Hondo, and you can read a little bit more about these guitars. They're actually very good guitars, and like I said, especially when the Hondo II brand came into play. Alright friends, thank you so much for watching. I will have some stills, like I said, at the end, and I will add a song from my current album, Hollow Moon. Take care and have a great day.